All right, today we're pulling back the curtain on some of the biggest financial implosions we've seen in a long, long time. We're going to get right into the psychology of the heist to really understand how these massive, multi-billion-dollar illusions are actually built from the ground up.
So let's just start with a really basic question. We're all taught that finance is supposed to be this world of pure logic, right? It's all about hard numbers and unshakable systems. But what if that's not the full picture? What if the whole game is actually built on psychology, where the line between a smart move and a complete lie is just dangerously thin?
I mean, look at this. On one side, you have the perception. It's all logic, hard numbers, complex systems. But the reality? Well, the reality is driven by something way more unpredictable, way more human. It's psychology. It's what we all decide to believe together. And it's the stories we tell ourselves. When you boil it all down, it just comes down to one thing: trust.
And boy, have we seen what happens when that trust is completely shattered. I mean, think about the absolute bombshell of the $32 billion FTX collapse, or the pure meme-fueled insanity of GameStop, or, the endless parade of Bitcoin killers that promise you the world and deliver, well, nothing. These aren't just blips on the market. They're total, catastrophic failures of trust. So how do these spectacular implosions actually happen? The thing is, they're not random. Not at all. They're often engineered by people who know exactly how to hack our own human code against us. So let's take a look at the tools of the trade, the psychological tricks they use to manipulate our most basic instincts. Okay, so the first and maybe the most powerful tool in the toolbox is something called social proof. It's really just a fancy term for our deep-seated need to follow the herd. When we're not sure what to do, what's our first instinct? We look around to see what everyone else is doing. If it seems like everyone is buying in, our brain just screams, that must be the right move. It's a basic human bias, and manipulators are experts at weaponizing it.
And that herd mentality flows right into the next tool: manufactured demand. This is where the real magic trick happens, creating value out of absolutely thin air. By making something seem incredibly scarce or wildly popular, you can artificially inflate what people think it's worth. It's all about controlling the perception, because in these games, perception is reality. So you take the social proof, you add in the manufactured demand, and what do you get? You get a gut punch of an emotion we all know too well: FOMO, the fear of missing out. It's that awful sinking feeling you get when you're scrolling through social media and it looks like every single person you know is getting rich on some new investment, except you. It's a primal fear, and it is the rocket fuel that powers these speculative bubbles. And you can literally see how these tools create a repeatable pipeline to disaster. Step one, you create a massive media hype storm. Nonstop articles, celebrity endorsements, the whole deal. Step two, you use social proof to create intense pressure to jump on board. Step three, all that pressure triggers impulsive, fear-driven investing from the public. And then, step four, once the bubble is big enough, the insiders pull the plug. They cash out with their billionaire exit strategy and leave everyone else holding the bag. But who is the architect behind all of this? More often than not, it's a very specific kind of charismatic leader. And that brings us to our next section, the savior trap, and this really fascinating idea of the benevolent fraud. Just take a second and really think about that quote. We're always told to watch out for the cartoonishly greedy corporate villain, right? But history shows us again and again that the most dangerous schemes, the ones that do the most damage, are often run by people who claim they have some kind of higher purpose. Psychologists call this the savior complex. And in the world of business, it's when a founder wraps their entire company in this big idealistic mission. They're not just selling a product, they're selling a utopian vision. And that vision becomes the perfect smokescreen to hide what's really going on: systemic greed, and let's be honest, often flat-out illegal practices. So how do you actually spot one of these savior types? Well, here are some massive red flags to look for. They promise to save the world with some radical new ideology. They use that higher purpose to justify bending or even breaking the rules. They might even talk a big game about something like effective altruism. But here's the catch: they're being altruistic with other people's money. It's a tangled web of lies, all designed to make you lower your guard. Which, of course, brings us to the inevitable final chapter of these stories, the aftermath. Let's really connect the dots here, from these psychological tricks to the devastating, very real consequences they have. $32 billion. Just let that number hang in the air for a second. That's how much value basically vanished into thin air with the FTX collapse alone. It's a number so huge it's almost meaningless, but it represents the staggering cost of a single broken illusion. But behind that giant, abstract number, there are real people. We're talking about millions of them, regular folks who are left holding the bags. Their life savings, their plans for the future, all gambled on a dream that was never real to begin with. That's the real human cost.
So, what's the lesson in all of this? How do you actually protect yourself? It really comes down to one critical skill: healthy skepticism. It's about having that little voice in your head that questions the hype, that looks past the shiny narrative and sees the red flags before the whole thing comes crashing down. And it is so important to understand that these things are not isolated incidents. FTX wasn't a one-off. GameStop wasn't a freak accident. They follow a repeatable blueprint. It's a vicious cycle of greed that feeds on our own psychology. And once you see the pattern, you really can't unsee it. I want to leave you with this one last thought. The biggest risks in our financial lives aren't usually the things hidden in some complex algorithm that we could never understand. No, the most dangerous things are usually hidden in plain sight, disguised as the next big thing, the revolutionary idea, the charismatic leader that everyone tells you to trust, no questions asked.